And now we're ready for the final session of the program today, which is going to be a panel discussion that will be led by our very own Anders Ranum, who's a venture partner at Sapphire. He's an overall great guy to know, a fun colleague. He's a very passionate technologist, one of the really entrepreneur-centric investors that I know. And we've been saving the best for last, so no pressure, Anders, and over to you.
Thanks a lot. It's been great having you all here this morning. I know we are the last act before lunch, and I'm happy to see that people are still around. Hopefully you guys stick around for this session as well. I have a pretty distinguished panel. I allow them to introduce themselves, and then we'll kind of get into the heart of it. So PJ, why don't you start? Are you guys level 9 or 3?
Level 12, whatever. I'm PJ Kerner. I'm the CTO and co-founder of a company called Illumio. I've spent my entire kind of career in the networking and security space. What Illumio does is we've sort of built a platform that allows enterprises to visualize, understand, and sort of protect their data center and cloud applications. And I enjoyed all the conversation on that first panel about people talking about security, and like to spend some time on that and potentially answer some of those questions as well.
Mark. Cool. I'm Mark Nelson. I'm the CTO at Concur. And Concur is the leading SaaS solution for spend management, which is travel, expense, and invoice. I know what immediately comes to mind for a lot of you. Our founders used to say that travel and expense software is about as sexy as tube socks. But it's a great business for a number of reasons. Because you all view it as sexy as tube socks, like it's a problem that every business has, and yet every business would like to spend as little time thinking about it as possible, right? This is not what you do. You just need that to work for your business, and you'd like it to go away otherwise. And so that's what Concur does, and it's fascinating for a number of reasons. Because as we talk about, like I'm 2 years into this job, and I'm not a travel and expense guy. I'm a software and infrastructure guy for my career. And the reason that all of these topics resonate is the problems that Concur has had. Like we're living everything that's been talked about. We're victims of our own success. Because of that, and all the decisions that were made when Concur is a baby product don't make sense at the scale we're at now, right? Which is 35,000 customers, 35 million end users, 10 million mobile users. Like we're at a scale where all of the infrastructure and architecture really matters. And I'll talk a little bit about that.
So, thank you. Todd.
I'm Todd Brennan. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called VictorOps, and this is like the easiest gig in the world for me to do because everybody I sell to are asking all of the questions that were asked today. We allow you to place your team on call, specifically development people. We ingest all of your monitoring data from what used to be 3 and now is probably 17 platforms looking for what's going on. We digest that, we publish it out via a live mechanism like we just read to your phones, to your computer in a Twitter-like feed. We let you build on-call schedules and rotations. When something gets critical, we funnel it to the guy who wrote the code to allow him to respond to it because everyone else is a waste of time when you're trying to keep your systems running.
Great. I think we're going to have a good conversation. Hey, PJ, I want to throw it off to you first. You talked to a lot of CISOs. You see all these discussions going on, and what's their reaction, and how do they feel about their ability to respond?
Yeah, as I said, I spent a lot of, Illumio builds a security product, so spending a lot of time with, the information security folks. And one thing, their responsibility is around managing risk for the organization. And sometimes managing risk is around sort of saying no to, certain things. And they sort of see this train of all these cool things coming, and they don't really like to be in the position of having to say no. So they're actually looking for different ways to sort of be involved in the early stages of the software development life cycle. Where does security earlier in that cycle would actually be beneficial for them, like getting more information about what's going on, having the security folks actually talk. There was a conversation about what a workload is and being workload aware, right? Having security be part of those conversations is actually really something they're trying to embrace, trying to find ways to be part of the conversation. And I would challenge, everybody here to sort of, think, there was a lot of questions about security, but how can security be part of the discussion? Because I really do think they want to be part of that, and enabling them to do that. So that's one of the things I see a lot. And there has to be tools and software to be able to enable that, but that's definitely a need, and a desire.
Right. And maybe taking a level up, Mark, when companies operate at the scale where you guys are at, having some degree of history as well as kind of dealing with where the puck is moving and going forward. How do you guys deal with this from a people and culture point of view and sort of embrace this?
Yeah, I mean, that is the challenge of it, right? Like the technology, I'm happy to talk about all day long, but that's somewhat the easy part, right? It is getting the mentality right. And I love some of the statements earlier, and now I'm going to say my own, that are in much the same veins, right? And specifically for Concur, we provide a service, right? No one buys our software. No one gets our software. I tell my guys all the time, right? Like if it was cheaper to provide our service by having 1 million trained monkeys on the other side of the wire, we would have 1 million trained monkeys on the other side of the wire. Like our customers do not care. They do not consume our software. They consume the service. So first and foremost, it's getting back to being focused on that, because Concur had grown up again over 20 years. Had grown to a size and scale and from acquisition where we fell into all of the very classical traps around being siloed, around have a devs team and a QA team and an ops team. And if you ask the dev team, their job was to write code. And then the QA teams, their job was to test code. And then the ops team was to keep the code running. And it was like, and so who's looking after the service? Because that's all that the customer cares about. Like when the things go down, none of our customers care because it was crappy code, because someone missed a task, because there was a power outage in our data center. And the answer was, well, nobody looked at after all of that, right? And so first and foremost is getting back to just having that be front and center and be measurable, right? Like having the stats around what's really happening with your service, how available really is it, what are your customers actually experiencing? And back to the circle of pain, which is the same term I use for the pain inflicted on your developers, putting that in front of the developers every day, in front of every engineer, and saying, that's your problem. I don't care what you do. I don't care if you write code or test code or operate code. Like, that's your problem. So what's the best way to fix it? And as the first panel talked about, like, there's nothing about having that pain come directly back down onto people to reinforce the right behaviors. People quickly figure out on their own that those silos have to go away. Inside of Concur, we consciously shy away from the words microservices and DevOps just because they take on kind of this hyperbolic meaning and the buzzword of the day. But it's what we're doing, right? Like we boil it down to the essence because those are the problems that we're trying to solve, right? Like we have a monolithic code base of technologies that have grown up over time that needs to be broken down. We need to scale our organization. We grew up, a lot of what Concur was doing 3 years ago was still based on processes they'd come up when it was a 50-person startup. Well, my org's now 900 people on 3 continents in 12 offices. Those processes don't work. And yet you want people to feel empowered and responsible for all of that, right? And the only way to do that is to break it into pieces that can interoperate with each other without having people to synchronize every day, and that they feel like they have complete control and accountability for those small pieces working. And then lo and behold, you back your way back into microservices and DevOps. Look at that. But that's really how you get there, is focusing on what is it that you're trying to solve.
Todd, you've been having the chance of sitting on both sides of the table, I guess, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I built 3 SaaS businesses. 20 years ago, the first one we took public, and it was the 6 months to write code and deploy it every 6 months. My second one was an ad business, where we built a real-time ad exchange. Suffered very hard to actually run it in the cloud. It's fascinating. I won't talk about. And then the third one, sort of the passion business for me, having to live with SaaS businesses where we wrote software and deployed it. The thing I always noticed was if the problem occurred during the day, it got solved really quick. If it happened at night, it took all night to solve the problem. So that's essentially what we try to do, is get more eyes on the problem. And we talk to customers all the time. What I find interesting about this group is this is exactly, our customer base in terms of, it may be a very big established company. We have several cable companies that use our stuff. And what they're doing is, they have the whole infrastructure that you've always bought from them, But now they're, releasing new video on demand or new services, and what they're doing is end running their knocks because they realize they need to write code, deploy it, they need to do it every day, and the guy who wrote the code needs to find out about it. The knock is just in the way of solving the problem. It used to work when you deployed every 6 months because they would open the book of things that they knew how to fix, but if you deploy 5 times a day, there's no book. The book's different every day. So it's a super fascinating trend. I love some of the stuff I was hearing today about that.
Response to that, PJ, about circulating?
Well, I mean, I think, you sort of see how fast things are moving, right? I mean, in some ways, infrastructure, pre-virtualization, right? Infrastructure moved incredibly slowly. Like servers showed up on the docket, like in month speed, and you had virtualization come, and which accelerated the pace. You then had cloud, with public or private cloud, and then you have all these containers, right? And we are moving at an incredible pace, these days, and all solutions, right? I mean, again, I'm in the security space, but it's security has to be able to keep up with all those things. Back to these all have to be enablers for the same goal, which is again is the customer, right? I mean, there's lots of conversations about being customer oriented, being customer success oriented, right? But all the infrastructure, all the tools, the developers, the security, all sort of need to be aligned and sort of keep up with that pace. That's where all the products and the investment are sort of going. That's my opinion.
How's the security software world responding to that?
How's the
the product vendors and sort of how can you guys keep up with ever-changing landscape of what an application looks like and how it's defined?
Well, I mean, so there was discussion about, sort of seeing everything as code. And I don't remember who sort of said that, having everything checked in and security needs to be the same way, right? I mean, we sort of see how can you sort of commit your security policies? How can you have a source control model for sort of delivering these things? How can they be metadata driven? Because the metadata is really, again, part of what, people can sort of either tag or label either workloads or, servers and have systems. I mean, in some ways, systems that sort of deal with all of that and don't have to, and compute all of the necessary instructions to actually make that happen, right? And sort of, I mean, it's the theme of, part of the theme of this conversation is, bringing it up to the developer level, bringing it up to the sort of the workload level, context, and sort of making all the rest automated and whatever robotically controlled. So I mean, security has to sort of stay with that same view.
I'm excited to see where security goes because in a really in a rapid deployment, DevOps oriented architecture. I mean, I built 3 different services. I want something that checks my vulnerability every hour, not once a quarter. We from our large customers, we get these big security things we have to fill out, and it's almost laughable. It's like, we do a quarterly security audit because we have to do it to sell to the customers. But I'm like, this thing is invalid in like 13 minutes. Somebody's opening a port somewhere you didn't know about because they integrated some library that just does that, and because it's it's a lower part of a huge stack that a junior developer just integrated, it just happened, So I'm all about it. I mean, I'm actively looking for kind of security partners to integrate with our platform because anything that makes a developer smarter in the middle of the night is in our core mission.
I mean, I think if you think about the 3 V's of big data, velocity, volume, and variability, right? I mean, you have to have, you have to have security platforms that deal with the volume, like how many more containers are there than there are, VMs, right? So it's a volume problem, and then it's a velocity problem. I mean, the whole point of some of these, the microservice architectures is these containers live for, 30 seconds and then they sort of disappear. So you have velocity and volume problems. That's the question to sort of ask somebody when you're searching is how do you deal with those 2 kind of things? Variability is not as, there's still a lot of variability, but volume and velocity are the 2 important ones to sort of ask and talk about.
How does companies deal with when they get to your size? You get a lot of scrutiny from various angles. Compliance policies, compliance in general becomes an issue depending on the industry and the customer base that you have. But how do you guys sort of, is that a after the fact type of thing, or how do you guys think about that when you guys?
So in travel and expense and being a global SaaS company, this is a battle every day, both from a I mean, there's a bunch of angles. From the first and foremost is doing the right thing by the customer. Like, we have a bunch of very important security information, and the audits that we do is the way to verify. That's the way we communicate to our customer that we're up to snuff, right? Like, we don't do the things that are in those audits because we have to pass the audit, right? Like, the purpose of those audits is it's an embodiment, it's a common language that we can say we have the stamp, hence we've met that bar. But the real important part is that we're meeting those bars, we're doing the right thing for our customers. But then there's also regulations, which is getting more and more complicated around both security and also data protection and data privacy. That is a more convoluted world every day when you wake up with the latest regulations. And so that can't be after the fact, right? Like, that has to be baked into everything we do. Certainly around security, I always one of the mantras I tell my guys is, like, if you want a new CTO, forget about security, because I'll be the first one to go when you can steal all the expense reports. So it has to be, as everything these guys are saying, right? It has to be baked in. It has to be continually evolving. It has to be just part of the process of providing our service.
And at some point in the company's journey, you will inevitably be faced with some of those challenges. And how do you guys sort of start thinking about dividing up your infrastructure for either federal businesses or complying with EU policies and whatnot that gets thrown at you?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's no secret formula for that, right? I mean, for our business, and I think this will also play out over time. Like, there's a push and pull here that's happening right now, real time. Some of it FUD, some of it real. But yeah, I mean, for our business, obviously, we'd like to keep that as simple as possible. For governments and other entities, they'd all like to have their own, right? Like, for all these entities who are super conservative, they'd really like cloud, but they'd really like to keep their cloud, right? Like, that's their perfect world. And the reality has to balance out to somewhere in between. So there's no one size fits all. We all of our commercial is together in one place, but we have 2 data centers. So we've been pushed to that in terms of we have the same product offering, but we have an EMEA-based data center and a US-based data center for data at rest ownership issues. We do have a federal government product that had to be isolated. Now, it serves a bunch of government agencies, so we get economies of scale there, but it's completely separated from our commercial. So, like, where do you have to draw those boundaries? Kind of depends what segments you go into, how big you get, what law gets passed in Germany tomorrow. All of those things come into play.
How do you deal with that from an organizational point of view and the people that we bring on? And do you look for different people over time than what you did in the past?
Yeah, again, certainly the first and foremost is doing the right thing for the customer, right? So organizationally, the biggest thing is being in sync, and this is far beyond engineering as well, right? I mean, this goes down to go-to-market and marketing as well, right? Like, well, do you really want to go into China, right? Like, what does that mean? Because that has very different implications than if you want to take all of the Nordics, right? Like, it's just different, right? So it's well beyond engineering. It's where do you want to go as a business? What is it that you hope to provide and in what markets? But then in terms of the staff, I mean, back to kind of the same things around DevOps, and the rest of it is just getting folks who are super passionate around the product, right? Around solving the problem. Back to, I love the discussion about having more and more generalists, right? Like, an engineer who just wants to write in his cube and write only JavaScript code for this purpose is way less valuable to me today, right? Someone who's just willing to understand all aspects of the business and solve a problem is what you need, because they're the ones who are going to think about that, who are going to be thinking about the financial and the legal and the regulatory implications of what they're doing.
How do you deal with this?
The multi-data center thing. Is that what? Yeah.
As far as the people.
As far as the people part of it. I kind of alluded to it earlier. I mean, we've had great success. To kind of go to your generalist thing, there's not a better generalist than somebody that just came out of college. I mean, by definition, they're just kind of generalists. And they're the people that have really taken on sort of that mantra of, I want to understand the business. I mean, it's amazing just with our company alone. We built our product. We notify you when things are wrong and give you an environment to solve the problem, right? So it didn't dawn on me that when we finally finished the product after a year of and we put everyone's on call in our company. That's what our company does. It's like, that's what you do. You're a mobile developer or you're a back-end guy, you're going to be on call. And, immediate uprising. Like, both mobile devs out, bailed. right? New mobile does in. Fortunately, I wrote one of the mobile apps originally, so I could backfill it. But we backfilled with people, and they really embraced the idea of doing the right thing for the customer, living the product. Because as a software engineer, you don't always get to live your own product. You can at our company. And it's about picking, I think, the right people with the right intentions. And a lot of times I'm 52 as well. I think it's a lot of time it's the younger people that want to dig in, and they really embrace if there's you hear a lot about millennials, but they're really about the full stack of the company, which is interesting because I've not seen that in my previous incarnation.
What kind of KPIs are you guys keeping track of to measure that you guys are doing the right things and incentivize the people in the right ways, other than availability of a service?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of dashboards up front, right? Some of them around the business and user experience; those are certainly first and foremost. But then the softer ones around software quality. How are the actions of the developers leading to those KPIs, right? Like what, simple bug metrics to velocities of the teams to, and really trying to draw that line. Like the nirvana of all of those kind of key KPIs is just that. Like, what are you doing every day, and what is that delivering to the customer? In terms of, certainly first and foremost is reliability and availability expected to be up, but they also expect us to be innovating all the time, right? They expect features, and our landscape is changing very quickly. But that's the key answer to really answer, the key question to really be answering is, what are you doing every day, and how is that translating into your user experience?
Similar things. I do think there's like a balance between agility and sort of moving fast and delivering features, and the quality and sort of consistency of the product, and sort of finding the right balance for your customers and your market as well.
How do you guys roll out your products at Illumient?
So we actually do have both a on-prem offering for some of we have large financials that are customers, and we actually do have a SaaS offering for customers who are decided to be all cloud and want to sort of take a security platform as SaaS. So we give people the option on what to do. It's kind of fascinating. There are some customers who I really expected to sort of take a SaaS offering, and they took an on-prem solution. They wanted to sort of own and operate it themselves, and some who I expected to take the on-prem and sort of have taken sort of the SaaS solution. So it's been kind of interesting to have both those possibilities for our customers and see who picks what.
So the same team that operates the backends and the service and the development of both products.
Yeah, back to what has been said. It's we have that same kind of philosophy, and we do have people, and how we've hired is people who really care about what the customer is doing. That like all of the people who write the code, right, really want to sort of hear what the customers are doing, hear how the customers are trying to do it, and what their pain points are, and because they really want to make the product better and really want to sort of make the customer successful. So it's that kind of mindset, that customer success mindset. That's a philosophical thing that you sort of build in from the get-go. There was conversations about how to make an organization like that, and whoever sort of said you got to start from the beginning, right? And then that's one of the things to sort of put there, and then it sort of grows on itself.
Any questions from the audience? It's a pretty broad spectrum panel here. No? All right. Where's the puck moving? What are you guys worried about in the next 18 to 36 months?
More of the same, I would say. Again, our agility is just picking up security and reacting, as one of the key balances we have as we go to DevOps, if we go to microservices, to use those words, right, is finding how much freedom do you give developers versus how we call them the rails. Like, what does have to be common? What do you not get to choose? How do I enable my teams to feel that sense of freedom and accountability without letting them run amok? And how does that then translate down to what our ever-evolving infrastructure services look like, what our ever-changing security services look like, right? Like, I want teams to have the freedom to pick their own languages, to do things within those rails, but I can't compromise security. I can't compromise the idea that I know what my overall site is doing, right? So that balance in the tooling that's coming up around container management, container deployment, container security, Like how I keep that where I don't have to lock my teams down and say, too bad, this is the box that you have to play in, but without losing the things that I have to have at a global scope. Like that's a real ongoing challenge for me where we're making it up as we go along today.
I think code ownership is huge. I mean, it was in the first panel, I think, as a longtime developer before, I started doing all this other stuff. It's like I always gravitated toward things that I could be more of a solo contributor, like UIs and things like that, because it was kind of very hard to sort of inject other people in the team. But I think it's great about what's happening, with microservices and things like that. It allows you to own a smaller piece. And I'm seeing that every day because, our customers are putting the whole organization on call. And you can make the argument, if everyone's on call, either everyone's on call or no one's on call, because, it came up in the first panel. If you get up in the middle of the night because it's something you wrote that broke, you're actually more interested than mad. You're like, how did that break? Like, I'm pretty sure I know exactly how that thing works. And by virtue of that, you're sort of mentally not on call. It's just more like, hey, that was my thing. I'm going to go fix it and I'm going to figure it out. Low stress. Conversely, if you're a guy that just, you're a UI guy, they got called on the back end, of some system, you're like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? I just don't have any idea what to do with it, And I think that it is going to be a real trend, I think, in the operations area and definitely in DevOps to involve everyone. And once you do it, it's actually really kind of empowering, I think, for everyone, the developer on up the chain.
Cool.
Jay. More Mark that everybody else do. When you guys are at scale, would you ever always run your own infrastructure like a data center, or would you move to AWS? And I know you're part of SAP, so that has other ramifications. But if you had the flexibility, and for everybody else in the panel too, would you kind of bring at scale, bring everything in house because at some point you can't say it's cheaper than running on AWS, or would you always run on or Azure or any other public cloud?
Yeah, excellent question. One that we're struggling with the right answer for today. I mean, my short guiding principle here is, again, I have limited staff, so I need to be good at what I'm going to be good at. And quickly, having the ability to run a data center is not a core competency that I necessarily need, right? And you have to be super careful when you talk about, is it cheaper or not? Just because the key commodity that I get out of cloud programmable API is agility, right? Like, it's not my fixed cost, because I can predict that super accurately, right? Like, Concur is not a bursty workload. I can tell you what load I'm going to have next Monday. I can pretty much tell you within 10% what my load's going to be on our busiest day of this year, which will be the last Monday in November. Like, I know that within a certain bound. So that the slash dot effect of, tomorrow I'm going to have twice the load as I did today, that doesn't happen to me. But the ability to have teams innovate and try some little variant tomorrow that they would never be able to try if they had to wait for an environment to be stood up for them, like, that is priceless. Werner Vogels has a great quote that I'm sure I won't get word for word that's right, but like, if you want the best innovation, is to make the cost of trying things goes to zero, right? What's the cost of a failed initiative? As that price goes to zero, you get more innovation. And so having my infrastructure be something that is where I can try anything tomorrow, like, there's a huge price tag on that isn't the fixed cost of me running my data center. So to that end, like, I would love to get to a world where I don't run any of that. But that world is complicated, right? And not just in the technical aspects of it, the legal aspects of it, just with my customers. And then, as you said, as having SAP as a parent, there's no more conservative lawyers than European lawyers. So, yeah, German lawyers in particular, right? Like, that adds another aspect to it. So there are complications in there on what's really both technically possible and then legally and logistically possible. But I think that'll change over time. And again, back to the guiding principle: do the right thing for the customers, and the best thing for the customers is for us to add value where we add value. Like, we know the most around travel and expense those processes and providing that service. Running a data center, it's kind of becoming commodity.
Have your developers use AWS to kind of innovate, and then when you actually have to deploy, bring it in-house?
So that's very much where we are today, is a mix of our predominant use of cloud and cloud infrastructure is test and dev, where the payoff is huge. And then our production environment is mixed, with a vast majority of that being in our own data center, and then some of it being in AWS and cloud vendors today. I expect that to change to be more and more, so even production is there, because when the last mile, there's a bunch of problems with, not all of that being the same. But that's exactly where we go today, because that is where for me, the biggest bang of the buck is that agility that comes in what we develop.
My last company, we literally used every cloud vendor, and it was a performance issue. It's just when in a real-time bidding scenario where you have to have the bids from different agencies within 100 milliseconds, it was a nightmare to try to get the performance out of the cloud. As a consequence, I challenge you to find an ad tech company that doesn't run on bare metal today.
Right.
It'll fix itself.
I think we're done. Thank you, everyone.